Anything there may be.
I'm not going to read this verbatim, but I'll give you the highlights of the illegal activities rental ordinance, which is in order to protect the health and safety of the inhabitants of the city of Sunbury. Any individual convicted of a felony drug offense or any felony offense involving a crime of violence, upon conviction and the expiration of any applicable appeal period, shall not be eligible to be a tenant of a residential rental unit. A felony drug offense is fairly self-explanatory. A felony crime of violence would include any of the following: homicide, murder, voluntary or involuntary manslaughter, causing or aiding suicide, drug delivery resulting in death, aggravated assault, assault of a law enforcement officer, terroristic threats, discharge of a firearm in an occupied structure, stalking, ethnic intimidation, neglect of care-dependent persons, abuse of care-dependent persons, unauthorized administration of an intoxicant, threat to use weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, strangulation, hazing, kidnapping, unlawful restraint, false imprisonment, concealment of whereabouts of a child, luring a child, concealment of the death of a child, and or trafficking of persons. As stated by Councilman Barnhart, 7 years after an individual's conviction, they would be eligible to rent in the city. However, 3 years after their conviction, they could apply for a variance to be allowed to live in the city. Sexual offenders are specifically omitted from this section as they're protected by the preemption of Pennsylvania's Megan's Law, and this section would be applicable to any new tenant or at the time of renewal of any and all rental permits. That's it.
So, as Councilman Barnhart and Council agreed, this is for the safety of our citizens and try to help deter crime the best that we can. And as I said before, this may not be the correct way to do it. I don't know. We're going to try to do something. Now, everyone has the right to disagree, but if you do disagree, please come with a solution. Not just say you're wrong, I don't think it's right. Okay, I'll be first to admit if I'm wrong or we're wrong. But if we are wrong, come with a solution to help fix our problem. How can we make our streets safer? How can we keep our kids safe? How can we make our city a safer place to live? So at this time, we're gonna allow comments. If you do have questions, what we're gonna do, just so we keep it in a timely manner, because there probably will be a bunch of questions, you can submit your questions here to City Hall and we'll get back to you on that. If you have a comment regarding that, we'll take the comments now. So we'll just try to keep it in an organized fashion. We'll start in the front of the room and work our way back to the back. We're gonna try to keep it moving along so everyone can express their concerns about the ordinance. So, no, and we are not voting on this tonight at all. We're gonna take your feedback and vote within the next council meeting or the council meeting after. There'll be no vote pertaining to this tonight, just we wanna hear public feedback. So at this time, if you just wanna raise your hand if you have a comment, concern, whatever it may be, we'll take any comments or concerns that anyone may have regarding this.
Brad Demick, 1337 Reynolds. Sorry I came in a little late, I kind of missed a little bit of the opening here. A lot of what I heard was like, you can't rent to these people with 3,000 criminal charges, different ones that maybe, I don't understand 100% of what they are. Now, we do background checks, we do, okay? So are you saying, are these all felony charges? Or, can you guys kind of like categorize these a little bit to make it easier on the landlord? Maybe.
Yes.
Okay.
And I guess I'm not supposed to be answering questions, I apologize, but at any rate, it's either drug delivery, okay, of a felony nature, so it's a certain, or it's a felony involving violence.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. Okay. Does this violate any civil rights that I'm gonna have to, be liable for as a landlord?
Nobody has made a decision on that yet.
All right.
And once again, Joel, we got this from the federal government, federal government guidelines for their housing for them. So it wasn't like we just made this up out of the blue to us. We looked at their standards and did the same standards that they have as well. So it wasn't like we just pulled this out of the blue.
Sure. I mean, to be honest, if I have to choose between violating a civil right or a local ordinance, I'm gonna violate the local ordinance as a landlord.
Another thing, it has to be a conviction. It can't be a charge.
Right.
It can't be a misdemeanor. It has to be a felony conviction.
All right. A lot of times background checks are hard to decipher certain things. You know what I mean? Is this, has this charge been settled, whatever, right? I don't know.
No, enough properties and we've never had a problem with looking
Awesome,
after
thank
background
you.
checks.
All right,
Oh, pretty easy.
so, background checks. Somebody muttered something, and I'm pretty sure it was probably just a rumor, but you don't need those submitted, right? Like, we've been fine with IDs. You know, normally when we submit, we'll do, here's our number of adults, here's a number of children, here's a copy of their photo IDs, and then somehow, for the last year, the city stopped accepting those. You know, even though we were submitting them ahead of time in accordance with the ordinance, and we were told, don't worry about it, we're not doing that right now, we're not enforcing that. Okay, which I don't like changing, if we're gonna do it, let's do it. You know what I mean? So, is there anything about background checks in this ordinance that I have to submit that background check to the city? Because that's a big deal if I do.
If there's not in this ordinance, I can't tell you it wouldn't be part of a future ordinance.
Mhm.
I can't tell you what. But what I'm telling you is, in this illegal activities ordinance, it is not a part of that.
Okay.
I mean, that's as honest as I can be.
Sure. So it's, what you're saying is it's up to the landlord to say, all right, you know, we did this background check, and to the best of our knowledge, this tenant does not have any of these offenses, so we're gonna rent to them.
What I'm saying is, I don't think there's been a decision made on that issue yet. Okay? And that I haven't written it up in any way, shape, or form.
Sure.
That's what I'm
Okay.
saying.
The
I don't wanna
only-
be unclear.
Right, the only thing I would say is make sure you check out like, the, you know, fair credit reporting and everything like that, because background checks are part of that. And like, when you use that to determine someone's eligibility, you're supposed to destroy that immediately after, so on and so forth. So there would be additional paperwork. You know, anything can be agreed on between people,
Sure.
you know what I mean? So you just have to take that into consideration.
Brian, I agree with you. You do a background check, that's your business.
Mhm.
Unlike we, the city, should be requiring you to turn that over to us.
Right, cause, you know, I mean, honestly, we pass that cost on to the tenant anyway, so whatever, but, you know, it's just one more barrier of entry. Alright?
I don't know, if I saw another hand, I don't know who was next. Ma'am, I saw like a hat.
Yeah.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, hi, Randy Buhner, and my questions are coming from Amy Buhner. She's on the phone here. The first question is the type of exception, appeal for the special exception. What is that appeal process again?
So what will be the process? Or what-
Yeah, for the appeal for the special exception. What is the special exception and how do we go about for the appeal? Is that listed in there yet?
It's not listed here yet. It says it says you can do it, but the
Right.
process has not been set forth yet.
And that appeal, that special exception is after a 3-year period of time?
Yes.
Okay,
From time of conviction.
from time of conviction.
Correct.
Okay, that's gonna lead me into the second question, which I also have and she also has. Is, the steps, when you're, is there steps, if somebody's already, say they've been arrested and they've been in prison for the 7+ years, or say they've been in prison for 3 years, does that time frame count towards the 7 years?
Under this ordinance, yes.
Okay, so,
Under it as it's written. Now, obviously, nobody's passed it yet, Randy.
Right.
I'm just being honest.
okay,
But yes, that is what is set forth in this ordinance.
okay, all right. Oh wait, she has another one coming
Sure.
up here. Okay. I won't take up time. If she has another one, I'll
Okay.
come. Oh wait. No, she's good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I saw a gentleman in the back. Gentleman, sir, right? Yeah, you right there, sir.
Kurt Sassman, Augusta Hill. This is the first public meeting I've ever spoken at. I honestly didn't expect this topic would warrant my appearance when I first read about it in the paper. I fully expected the city attorney would have realized the civil rights violation this ordinance entails and informed the city council way before it got to this meeting. So let me explain. The Fourth Amendment states the right of the people to be secured in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures that shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now what that means is the government cannot arbitrarily force us to provide our information without a crime being committed. The same reason the police cannot stop any random citizen and demand their ID without probable cause of that person committing a crime is the same reason this ordinance is also unconstitutional. While a landlord as a private citizen can certainly require a renter to provide certain information in order for that landlord to rent to them, at the point the government requires that landlord to provide the police or the city with potential renters' details, there is a violation of your Fourth Amendment. Since the government has now, without warrant or probable cause, demanded and secured your information, not only have they forced you, not only have they violated your civil rights, but they have forced the landlord to help them violate your civil rights under threat of revoking their occupancy permit. A landlord would be perfectly within their right to do a background check on a potential renter, and upon learning a criminal conviction, decide not to rent to them. But the government forcing the landlord to forward those details on to one of his agents is without a doubt a violation of a person's civil rights. Quickly, I'd like to speak on the moral issues surrounding this topic. Going through life with an addiction is not an easy way to live. Adding further burden to those, particularly in the early part of recovery, is not only counterproductive, but it's also immoral. How will we lift our afflicted citizens back to a productive life if we do nothing but add roadblocks in their path? I thought the purpose of the penalties surrounding a criminal conviction were to repay that person's debt to society. Why would you want to punish a person for 7 years longer? If you feel the penalties for these offenses are not burdensome enough, then I implore you to write your congressman and lobby your desires in the proper way, not to arbitrarily impose a new penalty after the obligation of the offender has been satisfied. These offenders are our brothers, sisters, friends, and co-workers. Addiction does not know any bounds. It does not see color, economic situation, age, or gender. If you want to affect real change in this community, I would suggest you practice compassion over condemnation.
Good job.
Go ahead, ma'am. I'll work my way back, so go ahead, ma'am.
Jenny Ernst, I'm a resident of the city, and I'm also a business owner. On the flip side, I've been on the other end of it. My neighborhood has been swatted twice. And I have had neighbors been taken out. There's also been a shooting in my neighborhood where residents have been shot. There have been drug deals. I have lived 4 years with drug dealers in my neighborhood. I have lost clients in my business due to drug deals in my neighborhood. It's been an ongoing issue in my neighborhood. We worked diligently to get landlords who were absentees out of my neighborhood. You can ask the code office, at times they hated me. The police have hated me. I worked diligently for years on end to get rid of the trash in my neighborhood. And we are at the moment, we are going backward in time in my neighborhood. I now have 2 new landlords who are helping me clean up my neighborhood again, and I am very gracious to them. I do not want to go backwards in this city. And I think this is a great idea. I think if y'all need some help, Lou Barletta would be a great guy to contact. And I'm fully in support of this. Yes, I realize these drug addicts need a place to live, but in the same respect, they need to realize they need help too. And I'm sorry, but just recently, I went into the Dollar General, I came out, I was stopped by people loitering in front of the Dollar General where there are no loitering signs, and was asked for money for drugs by somebody who couldn't even stand up. I feared for my life at that point. I will no longer park on Market Street and walk into the Dollar General because I was approached. This was during day. It is unsafe in this city. And when you have to fear for your life to get out of your car and literally walk 200 feet by someone and go into a store and then come back out, That's scary. I am a grown-ass woman. I don't know what to do. I don't know what the answer is. Not everybody is a recovering addict in this city. Something needs to be done. And I think you're moving in the right direction. And if we don't all stand together, it's not gonna happen. But it needs to be done properly. Lou Barletta did it in his community. And maybe someone needs to reach out to him and find out exactly how it was done and where we move forward. But it needs to be done. It's not something that can just be pushed aside, and it needs to be enforced. You know, things are done in this city, but they're not enforced. That is, I think, one of the biggest problems. Enforcement. You know, there was a homeless guy in town here last week, running around in his underwear. Not appropriate. There's things that are going on in this town that are not appropriate. Enforcement. You know? So I appreciate what you're doing, but people need to realize we all need to work together. So, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. How many people in this room actually live in Sunbury? Raise your hand. How many people live in Sunbury?
Yeah.
If I may, before the other statements, and we're not gonna deny anybody, as far as I know, but the, one thing I wanna make very clear, addiction is a sickness. We are not circumventing the law and saying that you are not able to obtain housing because of an addiction.
Correct.
This has nothing to do with possession or use of drugs. This ordinance is only relative to the distribution of drugs on a felony level or to violent crimes. I want to be very clear so that everybody understands that before we go any further. Thank you.
I'm sorry, can I also clarify, it's 7 years from the conviction, not from the time someone might get out?
That's correct.
Right, so if they've served 10 years, they're free to clear the rent in this city.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that for those.
Go ahead, sir.
If I may follow up on the young lady's question or comments. My name is Paul Uhal. I'm a longtime resident of Sunbury. According to the paper, this ordinance has been on the books for 10 years and has not been enforced. I don't understand that.
Can I speak on that?
Yep, go ahead.
I come on council right after that, okay? There's only been one incident, or two maybe, Joe, that we were ever notified that there was violations. Both incidents were handled before they even got started, okay? And most of your felony convictions are gonna be state, they're not gonna be local, all of them, I think are. So you gotta rely on state probation. And we had somebody in Williamsport at the time that was a state agent that would let us know and let the other communities know if there was a convicted felon coming to their community. Or see, what they would do is give an address where they were going to live when they left prison. Because they had to have an address. But there's only been 2 offenses, and they never were, we contacted the landlords and told them what our law, or what our ordinance was, and it never was, and I would say tested, but it never was, it never came to a fact. So it's always been an ordinance, and when we were made aware, we enforced it.
Thank you.
And going back to the enforcement, I know with Jeff and John, there have been more and more of the enforcement going on. I mean, all you can imagine, trust me, I hear a lot of the complaints how we haven't had to worry about this for years and why we getting citations now. So that that question has come up, and it's like we're slowly getting more of them and more of them. So these are gonna be ones that we're going to be enforcing, so. Go ahead, ma'am.
My name is Lauren Staley, and I just wanted to say how happy I am that we're sitting here and discussing this. Because when our granddaughter was young, she's 20 now, but we couldn't have her overnight because her parents didn't feel like it was safe on Race Street or in town, at all. And I am sure that there's other people going through that, don't want their grandchildren overnight because the streets aren't safe and whatever. And that has to be stopped too, because that's not fair to the grandchildren or the grandparents or aunts and uncles, depending on where you live, and people think it isn't safe for their children to be there. It's just heartbreaking. And I want to thank you for having this meeting tonight and rolling on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
And I'm her husband. We have lived here a long time. When we first moved here, it was nice, it was very livable. All of a sudden it changed. Nobody should have to see people die. I've seen 5 die within 2 blocks of our house. Drugs, they were all drugs, 1 shooting, 2 shootings, the rest were drugs. We bust our ass to make our street livable. There's no drugs on our street right now, and it's only because these guys, they gotta listen to us when we're saying something. I'm talking about stealing $50, I'm talking about life-ending situations. Like last year, New Year's, we came home, our house was lit up, we couldn't even go to bed because there was 2 ODs in back of us. All the fire police there, ambulances. We told them about it. It's in there. Oh yeah, we're looking at it. I don't believe that. They're looking at that guy wouldn't have died. That Jersey Mart, that's a snake pit. It's backed off a little bit now. But as long as those machines are in there and the clientele that they got going in there, and I heard this from a very reliable source. One of the dealers that managers of Pepsi told me, why don't you go in there anymore? I said, I won't go in that store, and I begged kids not to go in there. I said, where's he at? He said, he moved his family to Mechanicsburg because he's the one growing up in Sunbury. And that's the guy that owns the store. What does that tell you? We're just tired of it. Our street's clean right now, and we're gonna work hard to make it. But what I don't understand is, I'm all over this town. I see these Jaguars, BMWs, Mercedes, all blacked out windows. I asked the police, I can't prove how fast a car goes without a detection. But I know there's cars going up our street with carved out mufflers, low to the ground, blacked out windows, totally blacked out windows. I know where the cars are, I looked in them. And it says 50 miles an hour. It's a drag strip from 4th and Race up to the lights going on 4th Street, off of the street. It's terrible. And one of these days, there's 17 kids live on our block alone. And one of these days, somebody's gonna get hit. You can't drive that fast in this town. I don't have to paint a picture on that, but thanks for listening.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Jesse Storm. I do not reside in the city of Sunbury. I represent Brokers Realty, who is a property manager here at the request of Sunbury to correct the issues that were going on over at the dollar store and get the dollar store back open for the city. And in the process, we've cleaned the upstairs of the building out quite a bit of the drugs. I've provided City Council with National Association of Realtors videos in regards to the topic that we're talking about tonight. The issues that have come up that the National Association of Realtors has followed and had attorneys involved in it is simple. It is a federal crime to violate somebody's right for a disability, whether that's physical or mental. The federal government has stipulated that drugs are a mental disability. So anything that pertains to a drug conviction can be considered a felony, can be considered.
Case law for that, sir?
Excuse me?
Do you have case law for that?
I've provided you guys.
Yeah, there was none there. Do you have case law for it?
Sure, I can get you case law.
I'd like to see the case law because that's not what it says.
Yeah, I can get you the case law,
Go ahead.
sir. Just like you guys have said that a drug charge isn't a protected class. It is.
Who said that?
In the newspaper, which you guys wrote in your ordinance. You know,
Those guys were in the ordinance. What, in the newspaper?
the issue that at hand that you have in your ordinance is felony drug convictions.
Right, and I already explained that it states clearly that it's only for distribution of drugs.
That's dealers.
Yeah.
Right.
And do you think when you look at that drug charge that there's not gonna be use on there?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't care.
So, and then what you also have to look at in the federal government, and the federal government has looked at also, is the primary individuals who use drugs and are charged with distribution are primarily minority individuals. Again, we get into
Mr. Storm, I ask a question. Where do you reside at?
I reside in Cole Township.
Cole Town?
Cole Township.
Would you want a convicted drug dealer living next to you?
I most certainly wouldn't, and as I've said in your office, as I've said in your office, I don't disagree with what you're trying to do. However, the way you're doing it violates federal law.
So being the position that you're at, what is your suggestion? Because you even said you wouldn't want someone living next to you in that circumstance, but you're saying in Sunbury, we need to deal with it though.
No, I'm not.
So what do you suggest? How do we fix the problem here in Sunbury with these issues? What's your suggestion?
Many communities have activated a 3-strike policy and enforced it very well. What you've heard here from these people today are talking about the drugs on their streets, the drugs that are around their community, the drugs that are going on. Attacking an individual for a prior issue isn't how we fix what's going on today. A 3-strike policy has worked in many communities like Lancaster, Pennsylvania, like Columbia, Pennsylvania, York City, Pennsylvania.
Let's put someone next to you and give them 3 strikes.
People have.
We're not going to argue back and forth.
People have constitutional rights,
Well,
I would.
We got these ordinances? Have you ever applied for federal housing? Because
I
it's a
understand what
background check, and if you have a violent
housing.
crime on your background, or if you have a drug distribution felony on your background, you are not eligible for federal housing.
No, that is not true at all.
It's
Go
not.
back to that ordinance. You're not
Well, go ahead and
approved.
contact her and bring me
You're
the
not,
documents.
and I've already had this conversation with housing here. You're not approved for federal grant funds.
Okay.
The grant funds come
So you
attached
can-
with rules and
you can live in
regulations
federal
on.
housing then.
You could be approved for federal housing, however, you won't be approved for grant funding, which is what pays your rent.
Well, I'd also like to see that in writing,
Okay.
because I have it in writing the opposite way.
Yeah. Well, why don't you ask the correct questions when you
Sir,
call
where is your
housing?
law degree from?
I don't have a law degree, sir.
That's what I thought.
I've got 20 plus years in the practice of real estate and property
Mr.
management.
Storm, so continue with your concern, I guess you could say.
So the issue is to deal with what's at hand is the current drug issue that's plaguing the entire country, not just the city of
So what is your
Sunbury.
suggestion to fix the current drug issue here in the city of Sunbury, where we reside, which we need to deal with, where I teach, and the kids that are going home and living next to those situations, the kids that come to me and say, Mr. Brocious, what can you do? What can you do? What can you do? That's what I deal with every single day to try to help these kids so they don't have to live next to it. And then you even came in here and said how you don't want it living next to you, but you're saying that's okay because I don't live in Sunbury. If the drug dealers are there, that's okay, but I don't want them next to me. You give them 3 strikes. So you're telling me if you surround your house with drug dealers who can be convicted of distribution, you'd be okay with they lived all around you distributing drugs to your neighborhood and giving them 3 more chances. You're okay with that. Is this as long as these individuals are making a profit, these landlords or these brokers, as long as they're making a profit at everyone else's expense in Sunbury, that is okay. Is that what you're saying?
Let me ask you this, Mayor. Are you fine with having your constitutional rights violated?
by doing.
Are you willing to allow your
Actually,
constitutional rights to be violated?
What is a constitutional violation, because I haven't seen one yet.
Protected classes.
Yeah, which
Our mental disability is a protected class.
Agreed. Where does it say in here that anyone with a mental disability is not allowed
You
to
refer
drive?
to drugs. The federal
No,
government has already stated that prior use of drugs
Agreed.
is a defect
Which
of
is why
mental
that's not in
disability.
there. So
Along
go ahead
with
and
the
tell me
fact that the
about-
federal
go ahead and
government,
tell me about the violation, sir.
along
Go
with
ahead and tell me
the,
about
All
the
right,
violation.
so, Mr. Storm, if you have more comments or more questions, submit them, and